In a gritty neighborhood on the outskirts of Philadelphia, a shy, wiry boy named Jamie stepped into the sweaty, echoing gym of Iron Forge MMA for the first time, clutching a worn duffel bag and eyes wide with nervous awe. The gym was buzzing with intensity, fighters thudding heavy bags, clashing on mats, and coaches barking orders that sliced through the air. Jamie, just 14, had begged his single mother to let him train, promising he'd stay out of trouble and use what his late father had called the fire inside for something good. He was undersized, clearly new, and stuck out like a sore thumb among the hardened faces of young men and women training for blood, gold, and glory. Coach Ripley, the head MMA trainer, towered over most, bald with a scar down one cheek and a crooked smile that rarely meant kindness. He noticed Jamie's timid entrance and immediately smirked. Jamie approached respectfully, introducing himself with a quiet voice and explaining he was here for the youth beginner class. Ripley gave him a long, slow once-over, then turned back to his fighters with a laugh, muttering something about another wannabe Rocky. Jamie pretended not to hear, dropping his bag and beginning to stretch in the corner. He tried to focus, ignoring the sideways glances from others, and told himself it was just the first step. Later, during water break, a few of the other boys started asking Jamie why he looked so serious, and Jamie, perhaps too eagerly, shared that his grandfather had been a kickboxing legend back in the day. "My grandpa was Iron Fist Donnie McCall," he said, his chest swelling with pride. "He fought bare-knuckle in Bangkok, trained with old-school masters. My mom said Stallone himself used to call him the real-life Rocky." The words came out fast, like they'd been waiting for someone to ask. The others exchanged amused looks, and one of them laughed aloud, saying, "What? Your grandpa fought ninjas in the jungle too?" Jamie flushed, suddenly realizing how absurd it must have sounded without proof. Coach Ripley overheard the comment and walked over, arms folded. "Iron Fist Donnie McCall." Ripley repeated mockingly. "Kid, the only Iron Fist I know is a Marvel superhero. Don't come in here name-dropping old ghosts trying to impress people." Jamie tried to stand his ground, explaining that his grandpa didn't seek fame, that most of his fights weren't even sanctioned, and that he once knocked out a Muay Thai champ with a spinning back elbow in the middle of a monsoon. Ripley broke into full-blown laughter now, turning to the gym like a ringmaster announcing a circus act. "Ladies and gents, we got a live one. Next thing he'll say Stallone's his godfather." Jamie shrank a little, crushed beneath the weight of disbelief and scorn, but something in him refused to back down. "He trained me a bit before he passed," Jamie added quietly. "Said fighting isn't about flash, it's about discipline, control, heart." Ripley's smile dropped slightly at the word discipline, but he quickly waved Jamie off and returned to shouting at the heavyweights. From that moment on, Jamie was marked. Some of the other kids teased him, calling him Iron Fist Jr. and throwing soft jabs his way during warm-ups. Jamie took it all in silence, remembering his grandfather's words, "Let your fists do the talking, and only speak loud when you've earned the right." He started coming in early, training alone, hitting the bag with precision, practicing footwork in the parking lot. He studied old fights on YouTube, not just modern MMA, but vintage kickboxing bouts from the 70s and 80s, trying to find proof of his grandfather's legacy. But there was barely anything, grainy footage, mentions in forums, and one old sports magazine clipping his mom had saved. It was frustrating. He knew the stories were real, but the world had moved on, and legends fade when they aren't on TikTok or ESPN. Coach Ripley kept ignoring him except when Jamie made mistakes, and when he did, Ripley was ruthless in his corrections. Still, Jamie kept showing up, kept training. He started improving fast. His strikes became cleaner, his reflexes sharper. He even surprised a few older teens in sparring, slipping punches and countering with clean combos that felt almost instinctual. "That kid's got something," one of the assistant coaches whispered one day. Ripley shrugged. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. But Ripley was watching more now, even if he pretended not to. Jamie kept a photo of his grandfather folded in his locker, and before each session, he'd look at it for strength. In the photo, Donnie McCall stood shirtless and sweaty beside a ring in Bangkok, bruised but smiling, holding a young Jamie on his shoulder. Weeks passed. Jamie earned quiet respect from some of the others, but Ripley remained dismissive. One day, Jamie arrived and found a sign-up sheet for an in-gym exhibition tournament. It wasn't official, but Ripley used it to assess talent. Jamie signed up. That night, he visited his grandfather's old garage gym, still filled with dusty gear, old trophies, and a lingering scent of leather and sweat. He trained alone in silence, imagining Donnie's voice guiding him. Kick low, strike high. No wasted movement. Never lose your center. The tournament day came. Ripley looked at Jamie's name and smirked. "You sure your ghost grandpa trained you for this, champ?" Jamie nodded once. No sarcasm, no fire. Just belief. Ripley shook his head, still amused, but deep down, something gnawed at him. That confidence. That quiet resolve. He'd seen it before, but not in someone this young. The day of the in-gym tournament arrived like a thunderclap, and Iron Forge MMA was humming with anticipation, the scent of sweat and adrenaline hanging thick in the air. Spectators lined the edges of the mats, family members, off-duty fighters, and former students, clapping and cheering as the exhibition rounds began. Jamie stood in the corner, quietly wrapping his hands, his mind calm, but his heart a war drum in his chest. He wore no flashy gear, just a simple black rash guard and shorts, and tucked into his shoe was the same photo of his grandfather, folded neatly like a talisman. Coach Ripley paced the edges of the mats, clipboard in hand, barking instructions and assigning matchups, giving nods to favorites and ignoring Jamie entirely. The first few bouts went by quickly. Older boys overwhelmed younger ones, flashy kickers dominated sloppy brawlers, and then Ripley called out, "Jamie McCall, you're up." Mat 2, against Reese. A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. Reese was 16, built like a linebacker, known for his aggression and knockout head kicks. Jamie took a breath and stepped forward, bowing slightly before entering the mat. The match began fast. Reese came out swinging like he meant to end it early, his strikes wild but powerful. Jamie stayed calm, using footwork like his grandfather taught him, slipping jabs and checking low kicks. The first minute passed with Reese dominating space, but Jamie's counters began landing. Tight hooks, well-timed leg kicks, and quick pivots that left Reese punching air. The gym grew quieter. Ripley's clipboard slowly lowered. Jamie ducked under a wild cross and landed a liver shot that folded Reese for a heartbeat before he backed away, coughing. There was no ref, just sparring rules, but even Reese knew he'd been tagged clean. The round ended with Jamie standing tall, barely breathing hard, while Reese slumped against the wall, frustration etched on his face. A few claps broke out. Ripley called the match. Winner, McCall. He didn't look amused. Jamie nodded respectfully and walked off the mat without showboating. He knew better. His next match was tougher, a wrestler with good hands and strong clinch work, but Jamie adapted. He used elbows in close, knees to the body, and quick pivots to escape takedowns. His style looked nothing like the others. It was old school, efficient, rooted in control and timing. Ripley watched from the sidelines, arms folded tightly, saying nothing, but his eyes had narrowed. By Jamie's third fight, even the loudest hecklers had gone quiet. He was reading opponents like chess moves, slipping under punches and returning fire with calm, calculated force. No wasted energy. Just as Donnie McCall once said. In the semifinals, he faced a crowd favorite, Elijah, a jiu-jitsu blue belt with sharp boxing and a showman's flair. The fight was electric. Elijah danced and taunted, trying to break Jamie's rhythm, but Jamie's composure never cracked. When Elijah went for a spinning back fist, Jamie sidestepped and answered with a precise right elbow that caught him clean on the cheek. The gym gasped. Elijah stumbled, then fell. It wasn't a knockout, but it was enough. Ripley waved it off, quietly, with a slow nod. Jamie stood over Elijah, offered a hand, and helped him up. That's how Donnie taught him. Finish clean, respect always. By now, the crowd was leaning in, captivated. The boy they mocked was now a mystery. Where did he learn this? Who trained him? Some of the older students began murmuring to each other, pulling out their phones, try to Google Iron Fist Donnie McCall. Bits and pieces surfaced. An old VHS fight converted to YouTube, a grainy photo from a 1983 underground tournament, a forum post describing a wild American who beat Thai champions in their prime. The legend was real, just hidden, forgotten. Until now, Ripley finally approached Jamie after the semifinals. He didn't smile, didn't offer praise, just said, "Finals in 20. Don't get cocky." But Jamie saw it. The tiny glimmer of respect buried in his coach's otherwise stone expression. Jamie sat quietly, drinking water, recentering himself. He didn't care about proving them wrong anymore. This wasn't about revenge. This was about honoring what he learned in a dusty garage from a man who fought not for money or fame, but for love of the art. The final match was brutal. Jamie faced Malik, a 19-year-old amateur with a fight already scheduled in an actual promotion. Strong, fast, confident. Ripley had high hopes for him. The room went still as the two squared off. Malik came out sharp, probing with jabs, feinting takedowns, mixing up strikes. Jamie adjusted slowly. Took a few hits, bled a little, but he stayed on his feet. Round 1 was tight. Round 2, Jamie began to find the rhythm. He parried low kicks and answered with hooks to the ribs, turning inside Malik's angles with brutal economy. Malik scored a clean shot to Jamie's temple that rattled him. And for a second it looked like he dropped, but he didn't. He reset. He moved. He struck. The final seconds ticked down, and both fighters stood toe-to-toe, exchanging flurries in a blur of motion, sweat, and noise. And then it was over. Ripley didn't declare a winner right away. He looked at both of them, looked at the crowd. Finally, he said, "Split decision. Goes to McCall." Silence. Then an eruption of cheers. Even Malik smiled and gave Jamie a nod. Jamie bowed, then turned and walked to the back. He didn't raise his arms, didn't soak it in, just found a corner and knelt, whispering a quiet, "Thanks, Gramps." When he stood, Ripley was there, arms folded, eyes hard but thoughtful. "You fight different," Ripley said. Jamie shrugged. "He taught me to fight for peace, not noise." Ripley stared a moment longer, then muttered, "Don't go soft on me now, McCall. Next week, you're sparring with the advanced class." Jamie blinked. That was as close to a compliment as Ripley had ever given. Just then, the gym doors swung open. In stepped a man wearing sunglasses, a leather jacket, and that unmistakable voice. "Heard there's a kid in here who fights like an old friend of mine." Heads turned, jaws dropped, because standing at the entrance, larger than life, was none other than Sylvester Stallone. The crowd at Iron Forge MMA stood frozen as the figure stepped in through the door, a moment so surreal it seemed plucked from a dream. The man was unmistakable, square jaw, graying curls, leather jacket weathered from time, and sunglasses that couldn't hide the weight of decades. It was Sylvester Stallone, the Sylvester Stallone. Some of the younger kids only knew him from memes and old movies, but the older fighters and coaches recognized him instantly. Ripley's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The gym fell into an electric silence. For Jamie, it was like time slowed. He had watched every Rocky movie with his grandfather, listening to stories about the days when movie stars trained like real fighters. And now, one of them was standing in front of him. "Who's the kid with Donnie McCall's footwork?" Stallone said, pulling off his sunglasses with the casual flair of someone who had done it on screen 1,000 times. He scanned the gym, eyes falling on Jamie, who was still catching his breath from the final match. Jamie took a cautious step forward. "That's me, sir," he said, voice steady despite the tremble in his spine. Stallone nodded with a soft grin. "You're his grandson, huh? Damn, you move just like him." Ripley finally found his voice, though it was low and cautious. "Wait, you knew Donnie McCall?" Stallone turned, his smile fading into something more solemn. "Knew him? Man, I owed him." Stallone stepped onto the mat, and the fighters instinctively made way. "Back in '77, I was training in Thailand, trying to add some real grit to Rocky II. Studio didn't want me doing anything dangerous, but I needed authenticity. That's when I met Donnie. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't in magazines. But every fighter there knew who he was. Americans would fly home after a month, Donnie stayed and became a ghost story. A ghost who could knock out champions in flip-flops. The gym erupted in soft laughter, but Stallone's tone grew more reverent. He taught me more about balance, grit, and respect than anyone I trained with. I still remember him telling me, "You don't need to be loud. You just need to be sharp." He paused, taking in the quiet stares of fighters who suddenly realized they were standing on sacred ground. So when I heard some hotshot coach was mocking his name, I figured it was time for a little visit. He turned to Ripley with a look that wasn't angry, but disappointed. And somehow, that hit harder. Ripley looked genuinely shaken. "I didn't know," he muttered, voice barely audible. "He's not in the books. There's nothing online about him." Stallone shrugged. "That's the point. Some of the best stories never got written down. Doesn't make them any less true." Jamie stood silently, trying to absorb the weight of the moment. Stallone finally looked back at him and reached into his jacket. "He told me, if I ever ran into his grandson, to give him this." He handed Jamie a small, folded Polaroid, yellowed with time. Jamie opened it slowly. It showed a younger Donnie McCall and Stallone standing shirtless on a dusty pad of Muay Thai mats, arms slung around each other, grinning like kids after a spar. Jamie stared at it, unable to speak, his eyes stinging with tears. "He talked about you," Jamie finally said. "Said you had spirit, but no rhythm." Stallone laughed, a genuine belly laugh. "Yeah, that sounds like him." Coach Ripley took a slow step forward. "I think I owe you both an apology," he said, addressing Jamie and the memory of Donnie alike. "I judged you without ever watching you. I thought the past didn't matter. I was wrong." Jamie didn't respond with bitterness or pride, just a simple nod. "It's okay. He taught me not to take that stuff personally. Just show them." Ripley sighed. "You did." Stallone put a hand on Jamie's shoulder. "Listen, kid, I'm working on a documentary. It's called Iron Fist, The Forgotten Legend. It's about fighters like your grandfather, guys who built the foundations of today's fight game, but never got credit. Donnie's going to be the first story." He looked at Ripley. "But I want Jamie involved. I want the world to see what legacy looks like." Jamie's eyes widened. "Me? I'm not even pro yet." Stallone smiled. "Doesn't matter. You're not here because of hype. You're here because you move like someone who was forged in fire. That's rare." The entire gym had shifted. You could feel it. An invisible line had been crossed. Jamie wasn't the kid with a funny name anymore. He was proof that greatness wasn't measured in likes, titles, or sponsorships. It lived in discipline passed down through generations. Ripley shook Jamie's hand, firmly this time. "I want you training with our top fighters. Every day. And if you ever want to teach some of that old school movement, you've got space here." Jamie blinked. "Seriously?" Ripley nodded. "You earned it. No one's laughing now." Over the next few months, Jamie trained harder than ever. Ripley pushed him to his limits, this time not out of spite but belief. Jamie began incorporating Donnie's drills into the class warm-ups, low stance balance drills, timing games, and even the legendary silent sparring sessions where students fought without speaking or making sound. Slowly, even the cockiest fighters started to respect the method. Jamie won his first amateur kickboxing match with a perfectly timed switch kick that brought the crowd to its feet. Ripley raised his hand afterward and told the crowd, "The future of Iron Forge just stepped forward." Stallone visited often, filming behind-the-scenes training, interviewing Jamie, and even bringing in some old friends from the fight world. Word spread. A few old-school martial artists reached out, claiming to have trained or fought alongside Donnie. One sent in an 8mm reel from a 1980 fight in Tokyo where Donnie knocked out AK, one veteran, in under a minute. The footage became the opening scene of the documentary. When Iron Fist, The Forgotten Legend, finally premiered at a film festival in Los Angeles, the small theater was packed with athletes, coaches, celebrities, and family members of forgotten fighters. Jamie walked the red carpet in a modest black suit. Stallone stood beside him, giving interviews, sharing stories, always circling the conversation back to Donnie McCall and the idea of legacy. On screen, the story unfolded. Grainy footage of Donnie training barefoot in the jungle, Stallone recounting their time in Thailand, Ripley candidly admitting his past arrogance, and Jamie, humble but powerful, hitting pads with the same effortless grace his grandfather once had. When the film ended, the room stood in applause. Not for fame, not for flash, but for a man whose story had finally been told. A reporter asked Jamie what he hoped the world would learn. Jamie looked down at his hands, then answered, "That greatness isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just consistent, quiet, and passed down by the people who believe in you before anyone else does." Back in Philadelphia, the Iron Forge MMA gym commissioned a mural. It showed Donnie mid-spin kick drawn from one of the old videos with the phrase, "Discipline, control, heart, Donnie Iron Fist McCall." Below it, in smaller letters, "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who you leave it with." Jamie stood under the mural one night after training, wraps hanging from his fists, sweat drying on his brow. Ripley approached, handing him a bottle of water. "You're not just fighting anymore, McCall," he said. "You're teaching, changing how people think." Jamie smiled faintly. That's all he ever wanted. Ripley chuckled. "You sure you don't want us to call you Iron Fist Jr.?" Jamie shook his head. "Just Jamie's fine. He already earned the title." As the gym lights dimmed and the city outside kept humming, Jamie stayed behind for a while, shadowboxing slowly in front of the mural. Every movement a whisper of the past, every breath a promise to carry it forward.